Are you having a hard time figuring out what to get Dad for Father's Day? Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1 and save 15% off your order when you check out Row 1 Brand's Vintage Sports Pictorium Gallery. They have America's best sports art. With over 7,200 historic sports prints, you're assured to find something unique for Dad this Father's Day. If he's an NFL buff, check out the 1963 vintage NFL helmet poster. Shop now at sportshistorynetwork.com/row1.
This is our league, and this is your league. From the 55-yard line on CFL America Radio and the Sports History Network.
This is a league of A's and BCs. It's green and red and gold and black and blue. This is a league with 2 official languages and many unofficial languages. It's East versus West, wheat versus iron, love versus hate. This is a league where superstars are extraordinary and ordinary at the same time. It's a league of ice, of fog, of mud and wind. And for one Sunday in November, it's the nation's glue. This is a league as diverse as a country, a league of Jacksons and Kwongs, Johnsons, Moscas, O'Shea's, and Haji Razulis. This is his league, her league, their league, and their league. It's my league, and it's your league. This is our league.
Hey, and welcome to the 55-yard line, where tonight I am flying solo tonight. Scott is taking the weekend off. He's got a nice weekend planned with his wife down in Birmingham there. And so tonight we're a little change of pace. We are joined by co-author of Third and Long, The Proud History of Football in Ottawa, Howie Mooney. How you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here with you.
Oh, you're welcome. And for listeners, Howie is the co-host of the Sports Lunatics Sports History Podcast. Say that 10 times fast.
I'm not going to try.
And he's the featured writer at the Fired Up Network, and he is also the former color commentator for the Ottawa Lynx AAA baseball team and the Ottawa Senators. So, Howie, thanks for joining me. We've already been talking for about an hour before we hit the record button. So
I can't believe we've been talking that long already.
Well, that's the great thing about, us being sports fans, and we start talking, you can't shut us up. And that's, and you're like me, you're a huge sports history nut, more so because you actually have a book written on, on one of those teams that in the CFL doesn't really get a whole lot of, I don't know what to say. Nobody talks about them. Nobody talks about them much anymore, and that being the Ottawa Rough Riders.
Well, they went for so long without winning the Grey Cup. I mean, they went from 1976 to winning it then, Clements to Gabriel on that great historic pass. 1981, they made it to the Grey Cup final against Edmonton, but they lost to that juggernaut, that Edmonton Eskimos team. And then 2016, they got back to the Grey Cup. Henry Burris was the quarterback, and they won it in overtime against the Calgary Stampeders, a team that was widely favored in that game. But Ottawa won it, and I was in the building, and I'm so thankful that I got to be there with my son and live that moment out with him. And so that's a moment I treasure. I got to see my Ottawa Rough Riders, or Ottawa Red Blacks, Ottawa football team anyway, win a Grey Cup. And in 1993, I got to see my Montreal Canadiens win a Stanley Cup in the Montreal Forum as well.
And so you literally have grown up with your hometown teams.
Yeah, definitely.
And when did your when it comes to the Rough Riders, when did that fandom begin?
Oh, I think it was because my uncle was a season ticket holder. My grandfather was a season ticket holder. And the games were omnipresent. Everybody in Ottawa on game day, everything would stop and everything would be Ottawa Rough Riders all day. And during the season, it was all week, because at that time, growing up in the 60s, football in Ottawa was a giant party. It was a massive party. They had a great team. They were contenders for the Grey Cup every year. From the time 1959, when Russ Jackson became their quarterback, Frank Clare was their coach, until 1969, which was Russ Jackson's last year as quarterback. He retired after that. Frank Clare became general manager after that, and he gave the coaching reins to Jack Goda. That was like an 11-year party. Then the 70s dawned like a terrible hangover, and everything just stopped. Without Russ Jackson there, without a bunch of the other stars from 1969, 68, 66, the contending teams of the 60s, without them being there, it all just kind of stopped. And there became other things to do as well in Ottawa. As time went by, the Expos were formed in 1969, and they were an hour and a quarter, an hour and a half up the road. Everybody could go see Expos games all summer. When the Expos got good, in the later 70s and into the 80s, they became the focus for a lot of people. And the Ottawa Rough Riders at that time were really, really bad as well.
Right.
I remember in 80, 86, 87, 88. 88 was supposed to be Super Season 88, and I made air quotes there, dubbed by the team in their promotional material. The team went 2-16, and it was just god awful. And I remember going to games. We still go to the games, but we'd wear paper bags on our heads, similar to what the New Orleans Saints fans did. And after a couple of games with people wearing paper bags on their heads, people start looking and pointing at you. And, that's okay. I'm still here at the games. I'm still coming. I still love the team, but my love for the team makes me sad that they're so bad. And that's the way I feel right now about the Red Blacks. I mean, their O-line, their offensive line is just awful.
Yeah.
Somebody was saying to me tonight that, Trevor Harris is kind of on the outs in Edmonton. Ottawa could get him. And of course, Trevor Harris would be better than what they have, but he'll get killed behind that offensive line. It's right. Swiss cheese.
Well, I know, and playing CFL fantasy football over at Goal Line Software, I picked Matt Nichols up, and within 2 weeks he was gone off my team. And I was, as luck would have it, I was able to pick up Bo Levy. But you're right. It's sad to, even today's game, it's like, man, I feel for Ottawa fans, because knowing that feeling, being a huge Arizona Cardinal fan, I know that feeling of losing. So I get it.
Well, being an Arizona Cardinals fan is good for you this year, because they have a really, really good team, and Kyler Murray looks very, very good. Yeah, they do. It'll be interesting tomorrow to see if they can beat Cleveland. And it's weird to even contemplate to say, if they beat Cleveland, then we know they're for real. You just think about that. It doesn't. But if they win, but we'll see though. I mean, they are the Cardinals, so it's with football, it's one of those sports. It's such a game where the beginning of the season. I mean, we'll use the Cardinals as a good example. When the Cardinals went to the Super Bowl that one year, if you look at that statistics of that team, just how god awful they were. But man, when they hit the playoffs, and they squeaked into the playoffs, that's when they hit their stride. And, even thinking about that, there was a team in Ottawa that was kind of like that. Didn't they have a losing record going into the Grey Cup? I want to say 1981.
Yeah.
5-11. And they made the playoffs because there were teams worse than them. But the wonderful thing about that team was the fact that J.C. Watts came in, after the NFL cuts at Labor Day, which is about halfway through the season. And, he became accustomed and acclimatized to the game plans and the plays. And he just kind of absorbed everything, and the team rallied around him. And he was just amazing down the stretch. They picked up momentum at the right time. They won the Eastern Final. They won they won the Eastern Semifinal, then they won the Eastern Final. They made it to the Grey Cup. I was watching a thing today about it. A friend of mine sent me a little video, a 20-minute video of the Ottawa Rough Riders and their history. George Brancato was the coach. He said they were 25-point underdogs. He said you could get action on them for a 25-point underdog in the Grey Cup, which is unheard of.
Right.
But at halftime, Ottawa was leading 20-1. And for 59 minutes and 57 seconds, they either had the lead or were tied. A Dave Cutler field goal with 3 seconds left won the game for Edmonton. It was their 4th straight Grey Cup victory. They won the 5th the following year with Matt Dunnigan, who was on your show, and I love that show that you guys did with him.
Love that, man.
Oh, just an amazing show. And I will invite everybody that's listening to this, if you missed that show, go back and listen to it because it's spectacular. Listening to Matt Dunnigan tell stories, I could listen to that guy talk all night.
That show could have been 3 hours easily with as much as Matt told us afterwards and the stories. And, I always feel when I'm talking, when I talk, everybody up in Canada talk CFL, I always get envious because, we had the NFL down here, but it's, there's a closeness that Canadian fans have with their CFL teams that really, in my opinion, we don't have down here, Americans with the NFL. Yes, we root for our teams, but there's a the CFL is much more of a fans league, if you ask me. And it really is.
Agree. Yeah. I could think of a few examples of that at Red Blacks games. I haven't gone to any this year because I've moved away from Ottawa, right. But I used to make a point. My son and I would make a point to go to at least one game a year. He's up in college now, up north. And so I'm not going to make the drive alone, but they have a thing after the games where they invite the fans onto the field, and some of the players will stick around and talk to the fans. And I've seen giant scrums of fans around individual players. When William Powell played for Ottawa, I've got a picture somewhere in my phone probably of about 20 fans standing around just talking to him, and he's talking to every one of them like they're all his friends. It was just so warm. And just the ability, you could bring a football down there and throw it around and run around on the field. And I loved for my son to have that experience, being able to do that when he was younger.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
I was going to say the second example is, if you've ever been to a Grey Cup game, go to the Saturday festival the day before the Grey Cup game.
Yeah.
We went to the game. We went to the game in 2016 in Toronto. We went to the game in Ottawa in 2017. 2017, they had different places set up. But first of all, Lansdowne Park, Frank Clair Stadium in Lansdowne Park, it is all set up with restaurants and bars and theaters, and it's a total social scene there. And it's really, really good the way they've set it up. They had the festival there on the Saturday. Mike Riley was there, just standing, talking to people, answering questions from them. You could get your picture taken with him, go up, and he's 6'6", and I'm not, and my son is not either. And so it's almost like we would have had to stand on boxes to be close to him.
Yeah.
But he's so nice. And then there was down in the Byward Market area of Ottawa, there was another place that was the CFLPA kind of headquarters. And my son and I made our way over there, and they had a whole bunch of players there. Kevin Glenn was there. Almondo Sewell was there.
Right.
Patrick Lavoie from the Red Blacks was there. And we got to sit and talk with every one of them. I felt badly. Kevin Glenn, it was around 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and Kevin was sitting there eating. And I said, Kevin, I really apologize for bothering you while you're eating. Would it be okay if I got a picture with you and my son? And he says, yeah, absolutely. And he stood up and he put his arms around both of us, and we got this great picture with Kevin Glenn. And, it was just, it's hard to explain, because I feel that the NHL is like that in American cities, where fans have more access to the players there than we have to the NHL players up here.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Why is that?
I don't know. I think it's because they're still trying to grow the hockey game down in a lot of southern places. And so the fans get a lot more access to the players, so that they can have that feeling of closeness to the team and closeness to the players, and that word of mouth might spread and develop a fandom. or an attendance. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I think here it's kind of this. I don't know. It's not the same way in Toronto as it is in Ottawa, but in Ottawa there was this feeling of community with the players, with the team, and the fans.
Would it be very not dissimilar to say with Green Bay?
Yeah, I think that's a good example. I think that's a really good example of how it is. You recognize that the fan or the players are recognized by the fans as they're walking around, but the fans give them their space as well.
Right.
You don't want to be bothering a guy, but at the same time, you want to say, Henry Burris, the quarterback for the Ottawa Redblacks, when he moved to Ottawa, was living in a condo right next to my mom.
Oh, wow.
And, it was just like, Mom, that's Henry Burris. Yeah. I said hi to Henry this morning, like, Mom, do you know who Henry Burris is? Yeah. He's a guy that lives upstairs and he plays quarterback for the Ottawa Redblacks. I'm thinking like, Mom, do you understand what this means? It's like,
well, yeah. And then of course the kid in you comes out like, you become
absolutely.
And I know you've been involved in sports journalism for a lot longer than the 5 seconds I've been involved with it with our podcast.
But that still doesn't stop me from being a kid, though.
And I know I had in my own professional career, I had an encounter with a very famous Chicago Bear on a professional level, and boy, all of a sudden I became 12. And there were like,
when I was working in I would try to maintain that professional demeanor.
Yeah.
But I can remember a time where with my work team, this is like in 2013, 2014, I played on our work hockey team.
Yeah.
And part of getting to play on that team is getting to play in a 2,000 seat arena against NHL alumni guys in a packed place.
Right.
And so, I was a goalie. I played goalie for 40 plus years and I'm one of the goalies on the team. So I only played part of the game, which was fine with me because those guys would kill me. But I'm skating off the ice after the end of the period. And my time in the net is done. And I'm trying to get inside the door, to the benches, to go under the stands, to go back to my dressing room. And this old man kind of jumps in front of me to get through the tunnel. And I look and I realize it's Johnny Bower. And Johnny Bower is a Hall of Fame goalie. He played for the Leafs the last time they won the Stanley Cup in 1967. He played for the Rangers. He played for a few different teams in the old 6-team NHL. And
right.
He's no longer with us, but he is one of the nicest people on earth. And I realized that this old guy that butted in front of me is Johnny Bower. And I became like a 10-year-old kid again. And I'm Mr. Bauer, I can't believe it's you. Are you going to be here for a second? Can I go get my phone and get a picture with you? And he starts laughing. He says, yeah, sure. So I run into the dressing room and I find my pants and I go into my pocket and I pull out my phone. I turn it on and I run back out there with my skates on, my equipment on and everything like that. And, I give my phone to somebody. It's all set to go. Just press the button. And, I'm standing with Johnny Bower and we're talking and we're both laughing and saying stupid stuff to each other, stupid hockey, chirpy stuff to each other, and somebody takes a picture while we're talking. And I have this great picture of the two of us laughing together, me and Johnny Bower. Then I go back into the dressing room and I want to take my equipment off because it's smelly and stinky and sweaty.
Right.
And Marty McSorley is sitting in my spot telling stories to 2 or 3 other guys in the dressing room. And anybody who's watched hockey for any period of time over the last 30 years knows who Marty McSorley is. But he was a tough guy. He was Wayne Gretzky's kind of wingman when he played for the Edmonton Oilers and the LA Kings. And, if anybody touched Wayne Gretzky, McSorley made sure that they wouldn't do it again.
Right. They made sure they paid is what you're saying. That's
right. So there's McSorley sitting in my spot and I'm kind of got my hands on my hips kind of saying like, you're in my spot. Can I move a little bit so I can get my equipment off? But he's not moving. So there was a cooler in one corner of the room. I went in, grabbed a beer, and I sat down and listened to McSorley tell stories for 15 or 20 minutes. It was just like, doesn't everybody do this? This is the greatest thing in the world.
Oh, dude, that's an awesome story, man.
Well, then we go upstairs because there's a reception for the people on both teams. And I grab my son out of the stands. We go up to the reception, and I grab a table off to the side because I don't want to be in the middle of everything.
Right.
And we're just sitting there, and Marty McSorley comes over, and he's got a plate, and he's got a bottle of water, and he says, "Is it okay if I sit with you guys?" And we said, "Sure." So I got a picture of the two of them, Marty and my son. And my son at the time, I think, was about 11.
Yeah.
And they're fist bumping. And my son's fist on Marty McSorley's fist was minuscule. And it's a great picture because Marty's looking at him like, I'm going to kill this kid later on, and my son's got this big smile on his face. And, it's just, and the reason I love those is because my son was able to experience all of those things that I was able to experience as well.
Right.
Hi, I'm Oz Davis of the True the Goats podcast here at the Sports History Network. I'd like to take a minute to tell you about quite possibly the greatest website of all time, newspapers.com. If you're listening to this podcast or any of them at the Sports History Network, you're probably into sports history. And you probably also know that for learning about anything prior to, say, 1990 online, the typical search engines like are nearly completely useless. But then there's newspapers.com. Newspapers.com gives you access to over 640 million pages worth of news from North America, Britain, Ireland, and more, dating from 1798 to last week. Do up a search for Super Bowl I, the 36th Berlin Olympics, Wayne Gretzky's first game, whatever. Newspapers.com takes you there with historical flavor that search engines like just don't give you. And now, get a free 1-week subscription to newspapers.com by visiting sportshistorynetwork.com/newspapers. With a paid subscription, you'll also be helping to support the production of this podcast and other Sports History Network shows. That's sportshistorynetwork.com/newspapers. Newspapers.com. Way better for searches than you know what I'm talking about.
And is he like you? Is he a huge football fan too?
My son?
Yeah.
Oh, he loves all sports. I mean, we've gone on road trips. We went to Boston. We've been to Fenway. We went to New York. We didn't get to see the Yankees play because they were out of town when we were there, but we saw the Mets at Citi Field, and that's a really nice place. We went to Cooperstown. We've been to we did the tour around the Great Lakes at one point because I was in Toronto.
Did you make your way down to the Pro Football Hall of Fame?
We went to Detroit.
Okay.
We went to Canton. We went to Cleveland, saw a game in Cleveland. We went to Pittsburgh and saw a game in Pittsburgh as well. But a story. We're driving on the highway from Detroit to Canton.
Yeah.
And I see this billboard and I'm thinking like, oh no, I don't want to. I hope he doesn't see the billboard.
Oh, I think I know what kind of billboard you're talking about, right?
And he says, "Dad, what's Larry Flint's Hustler Club?" And I'm going, oh, I don't know. I had to figure out something to tell him that I don't know exactly what Larry Flint's Hustler Club is, but I have an impression of what it might be. But
you should have just told him it's a gambling place and just let it. I mean,
I should have told him that. I can't remember what I told him, but I dreaded the question, and finally it came, and I was like, oh.
Well, you know what? At least you don't have to explain, what the adult toy store is.
Oh, I remember driving by one of those, and he says, "Dad, there's a toy store there. Can we go?" I said, "No, we can't go to that toy store."
Yeah, no, that's true. Just adults only.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. No,
we'll go find a place. We'll go find a place with Legos. That's what we'll find.
No, driving back from Wisconsin, not last weekend, but the week before, my wife and I are driving back, and I'm like, I sighed. I'm like, well, it's been, with the pandemic, I have not been out to rural America for a while. So it was nice to get out. And I just kind of smiled. I go, it's nice to be, it's nice to see signs like this again. I'm out and, it's just, I forgot what it was like, being cramped, living in Chicago and, the pandemic kind of pinning us all down. And, you're up near Toronto, right? You're north of Toronto, right?
I'm north of Toronto. Yeah.
So you're like me, you're kind of in a big city area.
Yeah.
So talking about, okay, so you grew up being an Ottawa fan.
Yes.
Okay. And Ottawa is only about an hour and a half away from Montreal. So
yeah.
Was there any, when I talk CFL football to people down here, and I have to explain what are some of the rivalries. Now, obviously, trying to explain to somebody what an Alouette is, I get a blank stare. So when it comes to football up in Ottawa, who are Ottawa's big rivals? I mean, is it the Alouettes? Is it the Argonauts? Is it? I mean, because the whole division is within a couple hours drive of each other.
Yeah. Well, Ottawa to Montreal. Montreal is the furthest east. Then an hour and a half east of or west of Montreal is Ottawa. Ottawa is about 4 hours from Toronto.
Okay.
And Toronto was about an hour from Hamilton. So
you could do you could literally visit every team in the division in a day.
You could if I guess feasibly.
Well, at least the cities.
Yes, you could visit the cities in a day. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and
you'd be tired at the end of it, though.
Right. I've done the drive. I've done the drive from Chicago to Hamilton, so I can only imagine. And those, the people say, well, there aren't a lot of people in Ottawa, not in Ontario. Ontario is a big,
Well, Ottawa now is a city of about 1 million people.
Yeah.
It's not a small town.
Right.
But the sporting community in Ottawa is like a small town. It's about 30,000 people. That you see you see the same faces and the same people at every little thing. You might see them at your local baseball diamond.
Okay.
You might see them, but when you go to an Ottawa Senators game, you'll see the same people that you would see at an Ottawa Red Blacks game. And if the Ottawa Lynx were still there, you'd see a lot of them there too.
Okay.
You go to an Ottawa 67s junior hockey game, you'd see a lot of the people there. Okay. Same with if you go to the Hull Olympics game, which is across the Ottawa River, that you'd see a lot of them there too.
Okay.
And the thing is too, how in a small town, you kind of know everybody, or somebody who knows everybody. It's like that in the Ottawa sporting community. Okay. You may not know everybody in that 25 or 30,000 group, but somebody that knows somebody else.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Being in Chicago, we don't quite have that. I mean, it's such a big area.
And Ottawa too is a government town. Mm-hmm. It's like Washington, where a lot of people come from outside.
Okay.
So, the people who are in Ottawa and the people who love sports in Ottawa, it's a small circle in a Venn diagram.
Okay. And Ottawa, I mean, they've been playing football in Ottawa for what? I mean, professional. I mean, the Rough Riders started, what year did the Rough Riders start?
Well, they started as the Ottawa Senators.
Okay.
And they started in the 1800s, the 1860s. Football was very popular at that time, and it started as it's 12-man football, as a lot of people know.
Right.
And it stayed 12-man, up to the present day. It could have changed if the XFL and CFL had done some kind of work together, and I'm thankful that it didn't. But
yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm so thankful it didn't.
But it started I was watching a little thing today. It said football in Ottawa, or like the country, football in Ottawa started in 1867. And so, it started as the Ottawa Senators, and then around 1925, it became the Ottawa Rough Riders. And I believe that they adopted the Rough Riders name. There's two explanations for why they adopted the Rough Riders name. One was from Teddy Roosevelt with his Rough Riders group, his regiment. The other was the fact that Ottawa was a logging town at the confluence of the Ottawa, Rideau, and Gatineau rivers. And so the loggers would basically ride the logs down the rivers to get to Ottawa, where the mills were. And those rides would be rough. And so the there's that connotation as well. And I've read confirmations of both as the reasons to why the name was Rough Riders. So I can't give you a definitive answer as to where the name came from, but it's one of those two things.
Oh, okay. So I mean, it's like it's even up pretty much as to what it could be.
Yeah.
So with the Rough Riders name, when did they really be? So were they the Senators up until
about the
turn of the century?
About the 20s. Yeah, about the 20s.
Okay.
1920s.
Okay. And then, so for, a lot of people, for forever, it seemed like there were two Rough Riders in the league. And
well, that's
people, people don't know the history. So if you could explain the history on that.
Well, there was the Ontario Rugby Football Union, and there was the Western Rugby Football Union, or the Western Football Union, WIFU and ORFU. And they were separate entities. And it wasn't until about the late 30s, early 40s that the two teams, or the two groups, merged with each other. But Saskatchewan had the Regina Rough Riders existed in the Western group. The Ottawa Rough Riders existed in the Eastern group. and they never actually met each other until they met for the Grey Cup, which I believe was 1940 when Ottawa played Calgary, if I'm not mistaken, in Toronto. That was the first year that somebody brought a horse into the very posh and very old Royal York Hotel, and they were ordered to get the horse out. But it took a while to get the horse out of the lobby once they got him in. Those revolving doors make it hard for the horses.
Yeah, not like the big ones we have today, like at the Marriott's. You go in, you pretty much drive a truck right, inch your way you're in. If you got a small truck or a small car, inch your way in. The way those things go. So we're the Rough Riders. Have they played pretty much? I mean, football in Ottawa down at Lansdowne Park. Has that been the home of football for Ottawa football? The entire history of football in Ottawa, or
no? It became their home. There was an agricultural society in Ottawa that bought that land. Just like off of Bank Street, on the east side of Bank Street, the canal, and they bought that land. The Agricultural Society did for their agricultural fair every year, and it became a big thing to go there and see the animals and all that stuff. But the team began playing there soon after the Agricultural Society bought that land, and there was the big patch of grass,
right? And
they put up stands on the north side that could seat about 9,000. On the south side, people would park their cars, and in the later fall, when it got dark early, they would turn the lights on their cars to light up the games so they could end with the teams being able to see the ball and all that stuff. And when it got cooler too, you'd have kids like lying underneath the cars. The bodies of the cars were higher off the ground, so the kids could get under there and stay warm.
Yeah.
And while they were watching, the Ottawa Rough Riders play football, it was kind of, I've got a picture. There's a picture in Third and Long of the cars all lined up on the south side of the field, so they could do that.
And so, I mean, without looking or referencing this library I have behind me. So would Lansdowne be would it be fair to say that football at Lansdowne is probably the longest anybody's been playing football relatively consistently professionally at one location? I know.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Hamilton, but I think that Hamilton has been playing. That was Civic Stadium, and then it became Ivor Wynne Stadium, and now it's Tim Hortons Stadium. And I think basically with renovations and rebuilding, they've kept the same. I think they've kept the same footprint. I think in Hamilton, Montreal has been all over the place.
Right.
They were at Delormier Downs. They were at the Autostade. Then they moved from the Autostade to Olympic Stadium, and then now they're at McGill Stadium at the McGill University.
Yeah.
Edmonton Stadium. Edmonton used to be at Clark Stadium. Then they were at Commonwealth.
And they're and that's over in Edmonton. They're basically right across the street.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But in Regina, they had Taylor Field. Now they have Mosaic Stadium, which is supposed to be spectacular looking on TV. I've never been there.
Yeah.
Winnipeg has a beautiful stadium too. I think it used to be called Investco Stadium or something like that.
Well, it's you're talking about stadiums in the CFL. That's the one thing that I do love watching CFL games. Is the stadiums that the CFL has are pretty. I mean, especially in the last few years. I mean, how many stadiums have been built? 3 new stadiums have been built in the last 3 years, more or less. We had what? Well, we had Regina, we had Winnipeg, and then we had Toronto. They went into BMO Field.
Yeah, yes, they did. They moved into the where
TFC
was playing.
And then Hamilton rebuilt.
Yeah, they rebuilt theirs. Yeah.
And then obviously out in Ottawa, where they basically remodeled everything.
They did
when the Red Blacks came to town.
Yeah, and the south stands basically were condemned, and they rebuilt the south stands into this beautiful kind of space age looking thing. But it's what they've done around the stadium. They put restaurants and all that other stuff, and it's really nice. You can go there early. You can you don't have to tailgate. You can go to a restaurant, sit out on the patio, have a pizza and a beer before you go to the game, and it's great.
How's the parking situation there?
It's not bad. It's hard to park at the stadium. I mean, but what I do is there's a school with a short walk, and my son and I will park at the school, and we'll walk to the stadium, and it's pretty simple.
Okay. And so when for those who don't know, Ottawa was without football for a number of years.
Yeah.
Can you explain to everybody kind of how that came to be?
Bad ownership, I think, sums it up pretty much.
Right.
The Gleibermans had the team in the 90s. They sold it to Horn Chen, who bought it and had it until 2006. And basically he didn't want to do it anymore. And it was sad, because the people of Ottawa love their Ottawa football, whether it's the Rough Riders, whether it was the Renegades, or whether it was now the Red Blacks. But it was gone from 2006 and came back in 2014. The Osei group with Jeff Hunt at the helm at the time. Jeff was a dynamic guy. He bought the junior Ottawa 67s and turned them from a 2,000 fan a night thing into a sellout, 10,000 people in the arena.
Oh, wow. No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. He made the games an event. And my son and I were at the inaugural game for the Red Blacks in 2014.
Yeah.
And they had wonderful little giveaways. And I've got pictures of the game and us sitting in the stands, and they gave us medallions, and I've got the tickets that, and I've got them all framed and into this little thing, and I did it up as a big deal. But you go to the games, and like I said, you can go to a restaurant before the game, sit there for an hour or two, or however long you want. You can have a beverage, you can have food, walk over to the stadium. After the game, you can go down on the field. You can meet players, and it's a wonderful experience. And my son in 2014, I'm thinking my son was 12 years old. Okay. And so, that was at the age where, how everything crystallizes in your mind, and everything in sports, all of your great experiences are like just wonderful experience. And you'll never forget them for the rest of your life. And that's why I was really happy that he was able to go. And we went every year up to 2019, and then the pandemic, there was no CFL last year. This year, with him being up north and me being here, it's been kind of difficult, but I still watch the games on TV. I watched the game earlier today, and just commiserated with a whole bunch of people on Twitter and on Facebook, and cried into my bottle of water here, and I'll have a beer later when we're done the show. But
Yeah. So when the Rough Riders left, then in came the Renegades.
Yes.
And
the Rough Riders, I misspoke earlier, because the Rough Riders left in 96. The Renegades came back in 2002 and lasted till 2006.
Okay.
And so I apologize for that, but the Renegades kept the same colors, red, white, and black.
Right.
And but it was never the same. And
it's because I was going to ask you, what was the fan experience with the Renegades like?
Well, we were living out west at that time, so
okay, gotcha.
On the west coast, so I could only watch them on TV. I could only see them on TV. So,
well, I do know this much about the Renegades. They had, at least in my opinion, still the coolest CFL logo out there: a beaver with a maple leaf, and I'm like, that's actually kind of cool.
Well, their helmet logo was that kind of desperado guy, from the westerns,
right?
But was
it a beaver or a desperado beaver?
It was a desperado with the wide brimmed hat.
Why was I thinking a beaver? I mean, I've got the mini helmet in my basement. I should know this answer to this question.
I've got a magazine from the first year.
Yeah,
and football's back in town and all this stuff with the Renegades logo, and I'll have to find it and see if I can post a picture and send it to you.
Yeah, if you could. Yeah, it'd be awesome. Yeah, because I've got all the mini helmets. That's the one thing when I'd love to be able to put them all behind me, but I got the sun that comes in. I don't want to ruin them. So I've got all the helmets in my basement, and I don't even know where I'm going with the story. So just roll with me on this one. But when it comes to like logo, we're talking, I'm big on football fashion. So this is obviously an audio podcast. We're not doing video, but behind you've got the old Rough Riders helmet. with
Yes.
the R, and the first Red Blacks helmet. And,
Yeah, the white one.
And to me, and I think I told you this one before we started recording, that old Rough Riders logo helmet to me is still one of the cooler ones. It's even cooler than, even here in Chicago, the Bears, and even the Cardinals. The old Cardinals helmet was a very basic look, but to me, that Rough Rider logo helmet was the best basic look if you could ever have one.
My son wore that helmet when we went to the Grey Cup game in Ottawa in 2017. Every little place that we went to, as soon as he went in the room, all eyes were on him. And it gave me the impression that this must be what it's like when you walk in with a good-looking girl into a bar, and like all of a sudden every guy's looking at the girl. Every guy in the place was eyeing that helmet, thinking of a way they could kill him and me to steal it, I'm sure.
And that helmet, as you said before we started recording, that helmet has a story.
It does have a story, yeah. I left Ottawa in 2000, and my then fiance, who became my wife and is now my ex-wife, I told her, before we leave Ottawa, we moved to Seattle. I said, before we leave Ottawa, I would love to get a Rough Rider helmet. I'll buy it from somebody. I don't care. I want to get a Rough Rider helmet. And a friend of mine, Rick Sovieta, who played for the Argos and then played for the Rough Riders as well, he had a bar and restaurant called Rick's Cantina in the south end of Ottawa. That helmet was sitting on the wall behind the bar, and it was there for everyone to look at and love. And my ex-wife went up to Rick and said, Rick, is there a way, anybody that Howie could buy a helmet from somebody, anybody that would have one to sell? And Rick said, for Howie? And she said, yeah. He grabbed that helmet from the wall and put it on the bar between them and gave it to her. And when I got home the night before we were getting married, actually, and she was off with her girlfriends at the girls thing, I'd gotten home from the guys thing, and I was, a little non-compos mentis. I wasn't really all there because somebody give me alcohol. I don't know why, but I didn't turn the light on. I got into my pajamas and didn't turn the light on, went to go to bed, and I felt this thing on my pillow, and I turned the light on, and this helmet was on my pillow.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh my God. It's when we got married, I put it on the gift table, I put it there, and every guy in the place was like, where'd you get that helmet? Where'd you get that helmet? And I had to tell everybody that story, 100 different times. But yeah, it's one of my favorite things in the whole world, and I will never ever get rid of it.
Oh, that is awesome. That is awesome. And the white rough, the white. Yeah, see, I can't. It's late at night, so I'm having a hard time talking. But the white Red Black one, is there a story behind that one too?
Well, every year at the end of the season, the teams sell their equipment basically because you can't wear old equipment, because if you wear an old helmet, it can be bad for your health.
Right.
So they sell them off to the fans, and we happened to be in Ottawa that weekend, and we knew the sale was on, and we had tickets to go to a Senators game that night. So we made a kind of a day of it. We went to the Lansdowne Park, and we lined up. And by the time we got in, there was only a few things left. I got a couple of practice jerseys, and I got that helmet.
Oh, nice.
And so I got a picture of my son standing on the logo at center field, in Lansdowne Park, and with the helmet on and the practice jersey, and he's in a stance like he's a DB, and
yeah.
And so that's not much of a story, but that's the story.
No, that's a good story. It's the thing is, when it comes to you and I are both big football fashion guys. So when it comes to helmets or anything, and it's funny because I've got friends of mine in Europe, so they don't obviously they're not like us, growing up with our football, and just something about the helmets and the fashion. And we were talking about this earlier in terms of even today's look. I mean, even, talking about the teams today, up until a few years ago, and we were talking about the BC Lions.
Yes.
I love their helmet because it's very much a Denver Broncos look with when they do their color rush and they put the old Denver, and they slap it on. But there's something about just all the CFL uniforms that have always, I don't know. To me, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but just talking about, I'm like you, man. I miss the old days when the uniforms were simpler and just that very clean cut look. Even we were talking about using Oregon as a good example of, it's like, okay, keep it simple.
I understand that video games are all the rage and everybody wants their uniforms to look good on the video games. But to me, my favorite football uniform of all time is the 1960s black Ottawa Rough Riders uniform with the 3/4 sleeves.
Right.
And the white, that's narrow white stripes, the thick red stripes, narrow white stripe, thick red stripe.
Yeah.
That to me, that was perfection. And the block white numbers on the black jersey, they stand out, they pop so much.
Right.
And it's just, that's my favorite of all time.
And
I loved the Denver Broncos orange jerseys with the orange helmets and the white pants. I loved that look. When they went to the new blue, I was kind of like,
the current one that they have.
Yeah. Well, they kind of updated it since then, but I think it was 1998 or something like that
when they won the Super Bowl that year.
Yeah, and they had the stripe that went down the pants that matched the stripe on the inside of the jersey as well.
Yeah. I mean, Arizona switched their uniforms, kind of like that, and then they updated the logo, and I'm like,
yeah,
I like the parakeet on the side of the helmet. What they have now is kind of the mean bird, and it's still the Cardinals. I mean, they're still my team. I'm still going to root for them, but I miss that old logo.
Well, I loved the Cardinals uniforms when they were in St. Louis. Jim Hart was the quarterback.
Yeah.
The white ones with the red numbers and the stripes that were similar to the Ottawa Rough Rider stripes.
Yeah. I mean, very basic.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, though, I was having this conversation with my wife today because my wife hates the color magenta. Okay. And you know what magenta is. And I have a magenta sweatshirt. But one of my all-time favorite uniforms is the Southern California Sun of the World Football League.
Wow.
And Scott, when Scott and I have done shows, oftentimes we will both break out the magenta. Just
is it just to bother your wife? Is it just to bother your wife?
Well, kind of bother my wife at times. And but I try to explain to her, I go, you don't understand. When growing up in the 70s, loud colors like magenta and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and even the Miami Dolphins, those colors represent something. And this is kind of where I'm in a roundabout way talking about your son with the football.
Yes.
Those uniforms mean something to all of us.
Yep.
And it's amazing growing, looking at different generations. Like, here in Chicago, fathers and sons and grandsons have pretty much had the same uniform. They're all generations, same up in Green Bay. But, up in Canada, it really is not that way. I mean, other than Ottawa, I think Ottawa and Edmonton, and even Calgary. But there's just something about, and again, I'm going off on a tangent, and people probably tune me out after this, but no, there's just something magical about a football uniform. Don't know what it is.
I agree with you, and I think that there's room to talk about football fashion on any show.
Yeah,
so the old Winnipeg Blue Bombers uniforms with the gold pants and the either the white or the blue jerseys with the gold and white stripes on the arms.
Yeah,
and the white numbers on the blue jerseys and the blue numbers on the white jerseys. To me, I've got time for that all day.
Right. Well, and it's on my Twitter, when I do my Twitter feed, and you see it probably a lot too, I'll post old Minnesota Viking stuff.
Yeah.
And the reason why I do that, well, I always do that to give a shout out to Coach Grant, who follows me, because when he's it's funny when he pops up, it's like, hey, and I'm like, but I
was writing a piece. Interesting you brought up Bud Grant, because we talked about Bud Grant earlier too in our pre-show talk.
Yeah.
But when I recently wrote a piece on Bucky Dent's home run in Boston in 1978 and the lead up to that. But when I was going through old newspapers, I would see old stories, and Bud Grant goes CFL on, when coaching. He called out an old CFL play with the Vikings, and it gave them the win. And I can't remember what the play was. I was just kind of incidental reading while I was trying to research my piece. But if you ever get to talk to him, ask him about, if he ever used CFL kind of plays while he was coaching Minnesota.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. And well, like when it comes to those old Vikings teams, because I always look at those old Minnesota Vikings, I've always kind of considered, because Minnesota is far enough north, it's in the Canadian sphere of influence.
It's farther north in terms of latitude than a lot of the CFL cities in Ontario.
Oh yeah, that's right. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Didn't even think about that. But there's, it's something about back, if you remember back when we were kids, when the Vikings, it seemed like they played every year. But when the Vikings and the Cowboys played at Texas Stadium, there was something about the way the light bounced off those Viking helmets that just made them magical. If you go back and you go look at some of the old,
like Ahmad Rashad was playing, or
no, when Fran Tarkenton was playing,
Fran Tarkenton and Carl Eller and all those guys.
It was just a deep purple, and it was just, and you try to explain that to somebody who didn't grow up during that era.
Well, it's funny because the people I hang around with, or not all the people I hang around with, but a lot of the people I talk to, and I'm close to on Facebook or close to on social media, they're like you and me, that they care about the look of a uniform. They care about the font of the numbers on the jerseys. They care about, certain like shoulder patches and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, almost to the point where they're more obsessed about them than I am. And it's like, I'm like, okay, chill, boys, chill.
Yeah, it's almost akin to, after 30 years in the Navy, and I was in the Army, and I was both in the Army and the Navy. So, 30 years being in service. Yeah, we would get the same way too with that. I mean, we get obsessed, but there's just something. And if you remember, do you remember when Lanny and Scotty did their CFL show?
I'd have to
from Tokyo.
No,
up until last year. Yeah, they had a great show, but they always did a bit each week about uniforms.
Oh, really?
And so they would pick out a winner each week. And
I would be there for that.
Yeah, anytime, fortunately their shows are still available. Yeah, just to go back and listen to. They had a great show. In fact, they're the reason why I wanted to do this whole podcasting thing. Of course, those guys were professionals. I'm like, man, sure, but they just entertained the hell out of me, and actually kind of brought me back into the CFL, watching the CFL again.
I'm thinking, every time I think of those old Viking teams, I hear John Facenda in my head, on the old NFL films.
John Facenda, and that's the other part.
On a cold, gray, windswept day in New Orleans, Louisiana, Tulane Stadium, the men of iron from Minnesota met the men of steel from Pittsburgh. Fran Tarkenton and Terry Bradshaw led their teams into battle.
You hear that voice, and you want to go strap on pads.
Oh, and you hear the music and everything goes like, Well, I just want to turn the TV on and watch NFL Today from 1972 or something.
Oh yeah. I was having a big nostalgia moment earlier today, because I was on Twitter, obviously, and pulled up some old NFL Today stuff, and it's like, there's a kind of completely going off here, but there's
on our podcast last year, we did a show on some of the great broadcasters that we grew up with.
Yeah.
And we talked about Brent Musburger.
Oh yeah.
And Brent Musburger on NFL Today, that was must watch TV before the games all started.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I mean, and he doesn't really get his due either, if you ask me.
To me, he's an all-timer.
He is. And when the NFL Today was on back as a kid, did you guys get CBS?
Yep.
The CBS feed up there?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We started getting the American channels in 1967.
Really? See, we got screwed because we didn't get any Canadian stuff unless you lived on a border town like Detroit. And I lived in Detroit as a kid for a couple of years, but then we left and we moved back to the Chicago area. But yeah, we got screwed. Because I would have been I'm a big CFL fan now, but had we stayed in Detroit, I would have been, I
have friends in Detroit, and they talk about that. They talk about growing up with Hockey Night in Canada. Yeah. They talk about growing up with, Canadian football broadcasts and all that stuff.
Well, and you guys, but going back talking about the NFL, but back in the 70s, that was a magical era. And I think, I'm at the point now with football, and does TSN with the CFL, because all we get down here is just the game.
Yeah.
But does TSN have like 5 hours of pregame?
Not 5 hours, but through the week they'll do things like
right.
They'll have little features and stuff like that, and they'll talk, because TSN basically saved the CFL back in the 90s. Basically buying up the football broadcast rights and paying a good dollar just so that the league could stay healthy and stay afloat.
Yeah. Well, do they? I mean, with TSN, is our version is a Canadian version of ESPN,
yes,
more or less. But do they give a lot of coverage to the CFL?
It's not like I love ESPN and I love College Game Day on Saturday mornings. You can get up with it. You can eat your breakfast and watch the guys talk about all the different games that are going to be going on. And then on Sunday mornings on either the NFL Network or on ESPN, you take your choice, or the other, or CBS or Fox or whatever. You take your choice. Right. I love the NFL Network show with Rich Eisen and all those guys.
Oh yeah.
And that's eat your breakfast and figure out, do I want to play pro line today? Do I want to bet on any of these games today or what? Just the back and forth between the guys and the chirping between Michael Irvin and whoever he's on the set with and all that stuff. I just love it all. And and knowing, because having lived it, knowing how hard it is, especially when you got an IFB in your ear and somebody in the truck or in the booth or the control room is talking to you in your ear while you're trying to say something to the people, it's like knowing all that stuff and knowing how they do it. It's a masterpiece. I love it all.
Yeah. It's, I always find the world of broadcasting, sports broadcasting, fascinating. And, like I was telling you, I mean, a lot of these books up here behind me, I'm a huge Howard Cosell fan.
Oh, me too.
And I do the Gridiron Japan podcast, and I'm one of three. Zach Heilman, he is the master of ceremonies, but Zach's 25, and our man in Tokyo is from Ireland.
Oh, and really?
It's interesting, the dynamic that not only cross culture but cross generations.
Yes.
And so when I've brought up the name Howard Cosell.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to ABC's Monday Night Football.
And it explained what kind of impact he had in the 70s. He was everywhere.
He was a subject of one of our shows when we were doing the Giants of Broadcasting.
Oh, really?
Last year. Yes. We did Keith Jackson, we did Howard Cosell, we did Brent Musburger, we did a whole bunch of different shows. Just Google Sports Lunatics and it'll take you to a list.
I'll go back. I will.
Or if you go to my Twitter page, I can't remember what my Twitter handle is. I think it's at Howie Mooney or something. And there's a link to all of our shows in my pinned tweet at the top there.
Yeah, that'll be tomorrow's listening as I'm working around the house to catch up on all yours. And talking about Howard, and you're right there with me. But, you explain now to the younger generation who these people were and why they were important.
The sports viewing universe was so different then, though.
Right.
Compared to now. I mean, now, like you and I were talking earlier, last weekend, my son was here for the weekend. We had Thanksgiving weekend that weekend.
Yeah.
So he was here and we sat out on the deck and he had his laptop out and I had my tablet out and we were watching baseball on one with the sound down and football up on the other with the sound up. And we could go back and forth and turn the sound up and down on either one of them just to have it. And, it's just the way that people consume their sports, like the fact that we're doing a podcast now and you can listen to me and I can listen to you anytime we want and anybody else,
right.
As opposed to listening to terrestrial radio, which used to be the only way to listen to anything, it's all changed. The sports listening landscape and the sports viewing, sports consumption landscape is different.
And it's changed really, if you think about this. Now, clearly, obviously, social media is not good in the sense that when you have a divided society, it only divides it further. However, with sports, it's completely different because it is now literally leveled the playing field. I mean, I dubbed our podcast CFL America Radio.
Yeah.
Because it's, technology today in our cars everywhere.
Yes.
We don't listen, we consume, all of us consume things so much differently now than what we did even 20 years ago, that,
Even 10 years
streaming,
ago.
yeah,
Yes.
streaming and it's the wave of the future, which is nice. Cause I mean, we don't, for Scott and I, we purposely chose not to do a YouTube channel. However, on the Japanese side, where we're covering Japanese pro football, the three of us are doing a YouTube channel. And I've dubbed it Gridiron Japan TV, because really that's what it is. We're now at the point where, YouTube's on every TV. It's not like we're watching it on the laptops anymore.
No, you press a button and you talk into your remote and you say,
Yeah.
give me such and such.
And can you imagine, though, just thinking about it, because, you and I are of the same generation. If this technology would have been available to us in college, what it would have been for us.
We never would have left our bedrooms. We never would have gone to school.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's
But do you remember back in the 70s when if there was a Monday night football game with Howard Cosell and Frank Gifford and Dandy Don Meredith in the booth, and they were doing a game with the Houston Oilers and the Dallas Cowboys, Earl Campbell and Roger Staubach against each other. I mean, every eye in the continent would be on that game.
Yeah.
On a television. But now the fact that I'm looking at you on my laptop, and we're talking to each other like we're in the same room, but we're not. Technology is a wonderful thing, but I'm there with you. I mean, when I talk to kids, and I say kids, I mean, they're 30 years old, but they have no idea what everything was in the 70s and the 80s.
Well, and we grew up in a generation where we have seen, I mean, if you think about it, and I'm going to use my mom we'll throw my mom in here to, my mom grew up in the era of television and radio. Okay. I grew up in the area of television and radio. Technologically, our two generation, and my mom had me when she was 23. So there's an age, we're part of, in some ways, kind of part of the same generation, but the technology really, other than color TV and FM radio, but then, look at where we're at now. I mean, radio's
changed
dying.
In the mid-90s, the internet came in and everything just exponentially changed.
Yeah. And it's, but for us sports fans, it is a wonderful thing because, I've got terabytes of bootleg video, of bootleg NFL films, of games that, everybody way back when they had VHS tapes saved and transferred now onto video. And so we're able to at least look back, because when we were a kid, we didn't have that. We just had books and stories.
No. And then I remember about the 81, 82, we got a VHS machine and all of a sudden we could record. I could record that football game. I can record it when I'm not even here and watch it later. Oh my goodness. This is insane.
Yeah. It's, and then it's funny, like, what was it? 20 years ago, excuse me. Remember when TiVo came along?
Yes.
And to me, that was like, oh, it's a built-in time machine. I can stop time. And now we look
at commercials and not watch them.
Yeah. And now we've gotten to the point now where even that is kind of passe.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
I mean, you think about, it's every now and then though, I will flip over to the antenna. And it's like, just for whatever reason, I'm like, oh crap, that's right. This is live. I can't, it's like the old fashioned way of watching stuff. It's like, I guess I can't rewind that play.
Well, same here. I've got basic cable, but I've got all the streaming stuff and I can watch basically any football game that I want, any sports game that I want. I can go over to ESPNU and I can watch a game that won't be on anywhere else. It'd just be on ESPNU. Last year, I saw a game with Coastal Carolina and I think Hawaii. And because I heard the guys on ESPN radio on my way home from work talking about it. And I wanted to watch that game because it was important to Coastal Carolina. And I didn't have any money on it or anything like that. I just wanted to see the game and I was able to watch it.
Well, and, ESPN Plus is a beautiful thing. And that's, and for all of us CFL fans, even more beautiful because without ESPN Plus, I would, none of us down here would be able to watch the CFL.
I have a lot of American friends, and over the years, I've put out stuff on Facebook where, I can't believe the Red Blacks did this tonight. I can't believe the Red Blacks did that tonight.
Yeah.
And I've made CFL fans out of some of my American friends because of my enthusiasm for my team. And so I don't know. I'm sure for you talking to people there about the CFL, you get a lot of blank stares.
Oh, I get more blank stares than you can imagine. It's funny. Even my brother's a huge Bears fan, but when I talk CFL, his eyes just glaze over, and he's, he just...
when we lived in Seattle, I'd talk about hockey to people and they would look at me like,
really?
Oh yeah. That's why I'm so surprised. I'm so surprised that they have an NHL team now, because I was a religious listener to KJR, which was the sports station in Seattle.
Yeah.
And they would talk about hockey twice a year when they do like a courtesy kind of a promo thing for the Vancouver Canucks and have their play-by-play guy on to talk a bit of hockey. But other than that, they didn't talk hockey at all.
I always got the impression
98, 2000, 2001.
I always got the impression that Seattle was a hotbed of hockey just waiting to happen.
Having lived in Everett and worked in Seattle, I never got that feeling.
Right.
When I was there, because I remember talking to a neighbor about hockey, and he says, "Oh, I don't watch hockey. There's too many fights." And I'm thinking, like, hockey is such a beautiful game.
Right.
The fighting, yeah, there's fighting in hockey, but it's only a very small part of it.
Unless you hit the minor league games, and the minor league. My wife and I saw the Chicago Wolves play, and it was one of those games where I think a fight broke out every 5 minutes. It was awesome.
Well, it can be that way, especially if you have two teams that really don't like each other.
Yeah, it's
and you get closer to the end of the year, and you got everything's more important, and every play, every shot, every goal is more incremental to the team's success or failure.
Yeah, I think there was a playoff fight going on now that I think about. I mean, literally. Wait a minute. Now, let me think about this. No, it was October because And the reason why I remember that is we had tickets, but the Cubs were also playing the Giants in the divisional series.
Oh, okay.
And I think that was in 2016 too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because it was because we were listening to the Cup game on the radio on the way back, and it was kind of that moment, listening to talking about the way we used to listen to things, but listen to baseball on the radio, listen to football on the radio. Today was frustrating because I was listening to the Red Blacks Montreal game, and this is where we talked earlier about TSN's issues, that all of a sudden the feed cut out, and it's on Canada Talks.
Yeah. And
it went over. It flipped over to Ottawa Center hockey pregame show.
Oh, really?
So
wow.
I missed pretty much most of the first half because I was listening to it, and then all of a sudden, boom, it cut out. I'm like, well,
was this the radio feed you were listening to?
Yeah, on Sirius XM.
Oh, wow. Was it AJ Jakubek and the Ottawa crew?
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, it was the Ottawa crew.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if Kenny Verrere was on that broadcast.
Yeah.
He's generally part of that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was one of those.
Used to be. I'm not sure if he still is.
It was one of those moments. I was on the way, and I'm like, oh, crap. And I'm like, okay. And then I didn't, I think at that point, then I tuned out, and then my wife wanted to talk to me. And...
I understand. That's probably why I'm single now. But
yeah. So going back to talking about the Red Blacks, talking about the CFL, let's talk about kind of where we've been in terms of the last pretty much the season. The season has come off really. I mean, they've done very well this season and keeping the season going. Obviously, we've had COVID issues, but not to the point that everybody feared that it was going to cost games.
No, so far, touch wood as I tap the top of my head, we don't have any problems or issues where games get lost. I know that there was the one with the Edmonton Elks where I think 7 or 8 guys or 9 guys or maybe more had COVID and they couldn't practice and they couldn't attend any functions with the team or anything like that.
And that was a close call. I mean, that could have easily costed Edmonton a game just on a forfeit alone. And then we had Toronto. Didn't Toronto have issues here? Now I'm thinking about it, or was
I can't think of any issues that Toronto had. Toronto had an issue because Edmonton had an issue.
That's what it was,
and it was going to affect the Toronto game.
That's right. So I mean, we've got to the point now. I mean, the playoffs are closing in here by the middle of next month.
I know, and I can't, like, it's gone by so fast, and because it started at Labor Day, which is usually about halfway through the season.
Right. And now, let me ask you. I mean, I've lived, gone through those 18 plus game seasons. It seems to me, I mean, the 14 game seasons worked out well so far. And I know this is they're not going to do it next year because 18 games. I mean, it's a lot of money lost.
Yes.
I mean, yeah.
Yes.
But I kind of like how they did it this year. I mean, it doesn't feel like we were robbed of any football.
We haven't been robbed of any football. Unfortunately, though, it's to me at the beginning of the season, there weren't many teams that brought back the same guys that they had at the end of 2019. So to me, it was almost like 9 expansion teams.
Yeah.
New guys and new quarterbacks and guys trying to get used to schemes and play books and game plans and all that stuff that were different. There's stuff that they'd never seen before, new terminologies and all that stuff. And it took a while, I think, for some teams to get caught up and get up to speed. Look at Calgary. I mean, Calgary started off terribly.
Yeah.
And Bo Levi Mitchell got hurt, and Edmonton has not been good at all this year. And Hamilton, where's Hamilton been? They were a team that was supposed to be, with all their guys back, they were supposed to be top of the division. And, they're not doing well at all. And you got the Argonauts, the Toronto Argonauts at top of the East, which I'm thrilled about. And
everybody was kind of like snickering when they were making all those free agent signings. Like
I was.
It's worked out well so far.
It's been great.
Yeah.
And they've had the quarterback, the dual quarterback kind of combo with McLeod, Bethel Thompson and Arbuckle. And, one guy would be good for a couple of games and they put the other guy in and he was good for a couple of games. And
right. Well, and then you have, that is the good news part of it. But then the frustrating part is what we've always talked about every season is butts and seats. And
yes.
Tonight, it was part of when we were, we had the BC Lions.
The weather
game
looked terrible. The weather looked terrible in Ottawa.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that had something to do with it. But the other thing too is I having lived in Ottawa for a lot of my life before I moved away in 2000. And Ottawa is a funny town. Like I said, it has a small sporting community.
Right.
And they always love the new thing. When the Red Blacks came back, everybody was a Red Blacks fan. Everybody wanted to go to the games, and going to every game was a party.
Yeah.
The same thing happened when Jeff Hunt bought the Ottawa 67s. Every game was a party. When the Ottawa Lynx came to town in 1993, every game was a party. Once they won the International League in 1995, it's like attendance kind of dropped off, and
just the newness on it wore off.
They love the newness. They love the novelty of it all. They love the fact that it's all their friends are going to the games, and we're all having a good time. And then it becomes kind of like, oh, okay, well, there's a new thing now. Let's go do the new thing.
Got it. Well, I mean, do you think? I mean, you've been a CFL fan ever since you were a little kid. So, what's your gut feeling in terms of where we're going forward after this year? I mean, is it going to be?
I worry about Toronto. I worry about Toronto. That's my biggest worry because MLSE owns the Argonauts, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, and they are owned in a consortium with Bell and Rogers, which are the two competing media conglomerates in Canada.
Yeah.
And
at the Sports History Network, we're all about sports yesteryear, and so we're so pleased to introduce you to Row One, an online memorabilia gallery and shop that brings your sports history to life anywhere. The Row One gallery includes over 5,200 gorgeously reproduced prints of team posters, game program covers, game tickets, advertisements, and more in baseball, pro and college football, pro and college basketball, and more. And any gallery item may be printed in a variety of sizes on wood, metal, canvas, acrylic, or poster paper. And in Row One shop, check out the thousands more of unique unique items with a retro and historical designs dating back to 1876, including t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, phone cases, mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com, ROW number 1, for access to the full Row 1 catalog and for gallery prints and gift items, plus get a 15% discount off all prints on the Row 1 Pictorium Gallery with coupon code SHN15. Follow the link on the show notes.
Bell owns TSN, which owns all the TV broadcasting rights to the
Right.
CFL. Rogers doesn't care. And I think they want to divest themselves of the Argonauts. And they were the Bell and Rogers and MLSE were the prime, I guess, kind of catalysts in terms of talking to the XFL, in terms of doing business with them and talking to former CFL players. The questions from them were always the same. They were skeptical of any kind of association with the XFL, not because it was the XFL, but more so because if you're going to have games in the States, when do you play them? And
Right.
I can't remember if we talked about this during the show or before in the pre-show.
Yeah, we touched on it a little bit before we hit the record button.
Yes. Sundays are NFL days. Monday
Right.
is an NFL day. Thursday is an NFL day. Friday is a high school football day. Saturdays is college. What days are you going to play CFL/XFL football?
Right.
When are you going to play it? Where are you going to
Yeah.
play? Where are you going to put your teams?
Right.
Where's it going to be? How is this going to be successful when the XFL couldn't be successful on its own originally?
Yeah. And it's funny, talking about that. And, I have this habit. I try to listen to everybody's viewpoint, both north and south of the border. And so it was interesting hearing, I knew what the position was for most CFL people north of the border. Paul Woods, obviously, he was open to it. And rightly so. He laid out his position and it made sense. Hey, want to keep football. So let's do what we can to keep football. But still,
I have a lot of respect for Paul.
Yeah.
But I differ with him on this subject. But
Right.
But I mean, there's always been talk of the ratio of Canadians to Americans on the teams. There's always been talk about lowering the number of Canadians and trying to increase the number of Americans. And I think for Canadian players, it's important to have that Canadian representation.
And I agree.
But I think for a lot of fans, they don't care who plays and who wears their uniform as long as the team wins.
Right.
So I think that there's kind of a dichotomy of opinion on that.
Yeah.
But having talked to Ken Ivrer and talked to Darren Joseph around that time of the CFL XFL talks, I think both of those guys were kind of skeptical about the whole thing and kind of they wanted to make sure, okay, I don't mind doing this, but let's keep the Canadian American ratios intact. Let's not lose any Canadian jobs, for guys that have, gone to school, wherever in the States, in Canada, whatever, but let's keep the Canadianness of the league. They didn't want to go to 4 downs. They wanted to keep it at 3 downs. They wanted to keep the field the same. They wanted to keep, and it's really hard to put a Canadian sized field in an American sized stadium,
right?
Because they're built for the smaller field.
Right.
And so how do you do that? How do you get around that little hurdle?
Yeah.
And there are a lot of little hurdles like that between the two countries, between the two games that are important, I think, in terms of how you watch the game, how you play the game, and how you consume it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, when it came to field size, I always thought, okay, that can be negotiable, but the 3 downs to me as a Canadian fan was not negotiable, because
I think with the way it is though, with 3 downs, like 4 downs, it suits the smaller field,
right?
Because you can't use your speed to get around because the defensive guys have as much speed as the offensive guys, whereas having the wider field, 3 downs suits that because you can wear out a guy by going, 60 yards across the field, and try to turn the corner on him.
Well, and then it also came too, and the whole debate was raging on, and you and I were both watching, and I think I was chiming in a little bit more than I probably should have during that whole time period. And I was kind of like, well, if this is going to happen, then we need to try to find a way to make it work. Now, with that said, and we talked about this before the show, you've got, there's the American attitude of like, our stuff's better than yours. So how do if you're going to have two leagues merge, and one with the history and the other one basically being bankrolled by one dude, it's just, it's not only just a merger of businesses, it's a merger of cultures. And sure. I can only imagine if it was, much like when you have companies from two countries merging. I mean, it's one thing to merge the business entity, but then you also have the culture. You're also going to have hurt feelings. You're going to have misunderstandings. And I know down here, when the talks, when they said, hey, we're talking with the XFL, I tuned in the XFL podcast to see what they were saying. Unfortunately, a lot of them didn't even know what they were talking. Didn't even really, and for some of them, it made it to me. I'm listening to them. I'm like, they just realized, and I'm thinking to myself, because again, the way they're coming across, they know nothing about the Canadian game and know nothing about Canadians. And to me, that's where I kind of saw any potential merger going right off the rails, because, I'm hearing from Americans how crappy the CFL is. And, we know what the CFL's business issues are. There's not a CFL fan out there who's going to give you a rosy picture. As Tim Capper said over at Al's Flight Deck, he goes, oh, don't think that, the problems have not gone away. We're happy the season's with us, but we know there's work to be done.
Exactly. Yeah.
But when it came to, and Scott and I have had this conversation too, and that's why we talked to Dave Naylor to give us that historical perspective on the American expansion, because there's a lot of lessons to be learned with that.
Yes.
And one of the things that I think we all learned with that American expansion is, and speaking as an American, Americans are kind of ignorant of other countries, of other cultures, of other, it's not just a Canadian version of football. There's more to it. There's a history. We've talked to, everybody we've talked to who's been involved with the CFL, Matt Dunnigan, Jim Mullen. It's been great as Americans talking to people who have played in Canada, who are Canadians, much like yourself, because I get a more, I don't want to say this, and it's late night, so I'm tripping over words, but I appreciate the Canadian perspective so much more in talking, because I'm able to at least, I have these conversations, and I've told you about this. When you talk to an American down here about the CFL, their eyes glazed over and they're like, oh, they play football in Canada? And so, in listening to the other podcasters, and you've got some podcasters that have done a great job getting up to speed and are definitely promoting the CFL. And one of those is the Markcast. Reed and Paul do a great job, and they are commentators. They do opinion pieces. They talk to people. And I think they do a very fair and balanced job in covering the CFL. Obviously, there are going to be road bumps along the way, and it happens. And but I've heard other podcasters down here completely, dismiss Canadians in the CFL, while extolling the virtues of the XFL. And this is going back to what you were saying. To me, the XFL, as I went on the Turf District podcast, and I said, all the XFL is just a bunch of logos and a business plan. There's nothing definite.
Well, they did have some little rule tweaks that were
right.
nice. I liked the way that they brought the fans into the rooms and into the huddles almost, and I liked the way that they presented the game on TV. Yeah. I thought it was really enjoyable to watch.
Right.
I like the fact that they had the different gradations for point after touchdown and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The 1 point, 2 point.
Yeah. I'm definitely. Oops, you there?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I hit the wrong button. Yeah, they had some great rules, great ideas.
Yeah.
I mean, And we need more of that. I mean,
I think so. I think that having little things, little new things, it doesn't hurt.
Right.
I've talked to people up here in Toronto, and there are people in Toronto that poo-poo the Canadian Football League. They only love the NFL. And I'm thinking, like, I'm a football fan. Why can't we just be football fans? Yeah. I love the NFL game, and I love the rules and everything on their little field. And I love the Canadian game with the movement and the wider field and the 3 downs and the rules on the punts and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, each game is perfect for their environment.
Right.
I can't understand, I think, why anyone would hate on anything really having to do with football, because football is, it's people have said football is life, and it's kind of,
it is
life.
Yeah. It very, to borrow a line from Ted Lasso, football is life.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And so, I mean, there was a lot of passion on both sides, but bottom line is we're all football fans, so we can figure this out. But the one thing that like you said, why do we have, it's football. We should all be able to come together, no matter the version, the 3 down version or the 4 down version.
We can appreciate each one for what it is.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm all for spring football, but the issue is at least in America, spring football has never worked.
No, it hasn't.
And therein lies the rub.
Yes. I mean, dog breeds are all different, but they're all dogs, and we love all dogs.
You know what? It's the best example. Yeah, that's the best analogy. I mean, and then we're not putting down dogs either, but I love
dogs.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And some, obviously dogs are bigger than others at the NFL, but the NFL being the football superpower, because really that's what it is.
It's a monolith. It absolutely is.
Yeah, they make money just by they don't have to do anything to make money. Just merchandising alone is gonna,
television money alone. Money alone pays their bills.
Yeah, and they prove they don't need fans.
No, the fans, the money that comes in from the revenue that comes in from fans is gravy.
Right, and that's what's frustrating. That's what's frustrating about watching the NFL. But at the same time, what's rewarding about being a CFL fan is we know they need us.
Yes.
Whether it's to do a podcast like this and promote the game for free.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
exactly.
I mean, I've got a few family members that are watching CFL football, and one family member that I even, went so far as to order stuff from the Winnipeg Blue Bomber store.
Wow.
So, not, but it's little, but it's the CFL is such a grassroots type of fan base that's what makes it so rewarding, to do the CFL podcast, to be able to sit down with you, to be able to sit down, guys, like Matt Dunnigan.
I know.
Jim Mullen, Dave Naylor, even Upton Bell. I don't know if you've heard the Upton Bell interview. I
haven't heard. I'm gonna listen. That's gonna be my.
Upton's a huge CFL fan,
and I followed him on Twitter now for a while, and I love following him on Twitter. He has stories. He told stories on Twitter about his dad. His dad was Bert Bell, who was the commissioner of the NFL. At one time.
Upton is one of those guys that is the genuine deal in every story. I mean, he is, I would say he's your link to history.
Yeah.
He really is.
Because it's not just football. For him, it's everything. He's an encyclopedia. He really is.
Yeah, he is. And, you and I were talking. I was in Boston last week with my wife, and, talk to Upton every day. Hey, you need to go here. You need to go here. And, that is, he's, as I told my wife, I go, love that man. He's just, such a giving person. And that's what, that's kind of the beauty thing about being, but if it weren't for the CFL fan base, being part of CFL fandom and doing Twitter, wouldn't have met guys like, you wouldn't have met guys like Upton Bell, or even my buddy Scott Adamson. And that's what I love about football. It just kind of brings everybody together. So it was frustrating when the whole XFL, CFL thing we had to stand off. And, I'll be honest with you, there were some things that the XFL people really pissed me off. And it's, I'm like, guys, you know what? have you talked to anybody up north of the border? Well, no. Well, you need to. You need to, if you want to be a CFL fan, you need to understand the game, but you also need to understand the fans and the culture and the people behind it too.
One of the things I love about the CFL is go to a Grey Cup game, go to those festivals, and you will meet people from all over the country. And each person that's there is passionate about their team, but they're also passionate about the fact that they are a fan of the league, and the fact that you're a fan of the league and I'm a fan of the league. We can come together on that, and we can sit and talk, and we can smile at each other. And I mean, every Grey Cup, there's a group of old guys from Baltimore.
I've heard this story too. I mean, and they're always representing the Stallions.
They've got, one of them has their big coat with the Baltimore Stallions on it. On the back, the CFL Colts for life, but they're that was a button that was going around. They get the big blue giant foam cowboy hat like Homer Simpson. They got this massive flag, with the Baltimore Stallions logo on it. And these guys, they're just characters, and you got to meet them and talk to them. And it's just the same with all these genuine people from all over Canada, from out west. There are parts of the West that hate the East and parts of the East that hate the West. But come Grey Cup Day, we're all on our own little islands. We're all CFL fans. We all love the game. And we all, I love my team. You love your team. I love you for loving your team. And it's just, it's a wonderful thing. And it's something I never really understood it fully until I went to a Grey Cup game.
Yeah. And that's something you don't see in the States at all.
No.
I mean, we got the Bears Packers playing tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you know what? We all know, I guess it's, when you have the NFL, and the NFL is never going to go away. So you forget about, Packer fans and Bear. Nobody's big on league first because the league's always going to be there. But as CFL fans, we know the league can go away just like that.
You're right. You're absolutely right. 2016 Grey Cup game in Toronto, the BMO Field. My son wore the Red Blacks helmet to that one.
Yeah.
And he wore one of the Red Blacks practice jerseys to that one too. And we're sitting there before the game, we're having popcorn, and this guy out of nowhere comes over and he just puts his arm around my son. He's got a Calgary Stampeders helmet on and a Calgary jersey. And he says, "I have to get a picture with you." And I said, "Oh, this is great. Yeah, for sure." He gives me his phone. I get a picture of him. I get a picture of him with my phone, how would that happen at any kind of Super Bowl?
Right. No, I don't, I don't see it happening. I've been enough NFL games and major league games, and you meet nice people and that, but you don't, Cub fans are passionate and Sox fans are passionate. But
if the Bears were playing the Packers at Soldier Field and you were there and you saw somebody in a Packers jersey, would you go over and shake their hand or something?
What? I know I would.
Yeah.
But I know just as it's not, there's there's a sense of community in the CFL fandom where there isn't, say, in the NFL, at least in my opinion, even in Chicago. I mean, we're all Bears fans, but when it comes to the passion of a league that, all of us, none of us want to see it go away.
No.
And I don't think it's going to go away, but we both know that it's going to take a lot of work in the next couple of years to unbury themselves. I mean, the pandemic exposed so much.
Yes.
And you and I, who followed the league, we knew that there were problems there.
Yeah.
Because we could see them on TV, the lack of people in the stands.
Well, not just that, but we also know that the CFL basically is run on a shoestring.
Right.
And, each team basically is like a small business, whether they like to admit it or not. They put on a good show and but they're basically, each team is a small business.
Yeah.
And they're just covering their expenses.
Yeah.
But the thing too is that I had a point with this and now I've forgotten what it was, but the thing too is that, like you say, we all know, well, I was going to say, covering the Rough Riders in the 1990s. One of the opens for our trivia show that I wanted to do that I never was able to do was to have a football on a hospital gurney with a Rough Rider helmet there, hooked up to an IV, with the beep, 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 as we're rushing to the emergency room, and then have it go beep, and that, kind of like that's the Ottawa football right there when when the Rough Riders were gone, 96, the end of 96.
Yeah.
But
Well,
nobody ever wanted to do it with me. Nobody wanted to put out the effort to video, to record it, or to kind of block it out and stuff like that. But I was going to say last time on the Ultimate Sports Quiz.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I got a good feeling that, at least when the season started, when the season started, we knew it was going to start. All the bad feelings and all the worries went away. But we all know at the end of the season, it's all coming back. Where do you think we go from here?
I think I want to see the Grey Cup go off first.
Right. Yeah, that's what I meant after the Grey Cup. After the Grey Cup.
I want to see that. I want to see how that goes, because I know that the Ontario government now has just lifted all of the restrictions in terms of how many people you can have in the stadiums.
Right.
So I don't know if I know for Hamilton and for Toronto, they've lifted them. I don't know if they lifted them in Ottawa yet. Okay. And that's one of the reasons why the attendance in Ottawa probably doesn't look very good. Yeah. Because I guess each municipality is in control of whatever they do.
Right.
But I know in Toronto and in Hamilton, the restrictions have been lifted in terms of, for like hockey games, for football games, etc. It's kind of like, okay. But I don't know if anybody knows this, but before 1977, there was no beer sales allowed in football stadiums. I
did not know that.
Yeah. When the Blue Jays came into the American League in 1977, you couldn't buy a beer at the baseball games.
Really?
And they said, this is ridiculous. How can we go to a baseball game and not have a beer? So the Ontario government said, you're right. You guys can have beer. Hamilton, you can have beer at the Tiger Cats games. Ottawa, you can have beer at the Rough Rider games. And Toronto with the Argonauts games, so all of a sudden it's like a light went on and said, you know what, you're right. What are we doing? Now, obviously there are always some people that can't handle it and go crazy.
Right. Well, so it was only province by province. So they could have beer sales, say in Saskatchewan, or was it a nationwide?
Yeah, no, it was a provincial thing.
Got it.
It was province by province. But Ontario provincially has always been conservative. And
I've noticed that, and this is something I learned in this past with the pandemic.
Yeah, as a result,
Ontario was holding everything up. Basically, that was the linchpin.
Oh yeah, same with the NHL. Would we be able to play hockey? In the NHL, even if it's in a bubble, no fans. Just can the players come and play? Yeah. Well, we have to find a way to figure that out. But Ontario has historically, well, we can't have people drinking beer. That's people. They'll be hanging out on streetlights, hanging off them, like crazy people. If they drink beer, then what will happen? That could happen in our town. But that's been the thinking historically. But then once I can remember as a kid, we would get into the games, before pre-1977, and me and my friends would have a couple of garbage bags in our pockets. And after the games, we'd go through the stands and we'd pick up all of the cans and all of the whatever we could and take them to the beer store for deposit money. And that would be our poker money, for that night.
Oh, wow.
$10, $15 each, for whatever we could collect. And then we'd play cards and, as teenagers. And we wouldn't drink, but we play cards, and we'd collect all the cans and take them to the beer store and collect the deposit money. And that's what we would do. And it was kind of, we came from the poor side of town, so we had no pride. But,
well, back then too, man, you could get the recycling stuff that used to, I'm curious even what you would get on recycling in today's day and age.
Yeah, I don't even know.
Inflation and the way everything.
I remember I cleaned out my garage one time and loaded my car up with a whole bunch of stuff and took it to a metal recycling place. And I think I got $12 or something.
Yeah. I'm like you. I remember, taking the cans in and, it's like, oh, okay, got a nice little, it wasn't much, but it wasn't nothing to sneeze at either. It was, but
I had a bed frame and I had, some other stuff that I wanted to get rid of, and took it over to the metal recycling place. And I think I got $12 for it or something.
Well, let me ask you, you never got rid of, and it's kind of segueing into the next subject I wanted to, as we wrap up here, to talk about. And you never got rid of any of your simulation football games, right?
No, I didn't. I have football, I have baseball, and recently I got PBA bowling.
I've noticed that, on when you post all that on Facebook. I mean, I've got the APBA football, and I'm pretty much football. But I'm always when you post your simulation game stuff, it always catches my eye. In fact, I think I've stolen a few of your posts, your pictures, and just reposted them on Twitter. How did you get into gaming? How did that start?
God, this is a story.
Okay.
January of, I think, 73. I was in grade 8, and our history teacher, there was some kind of thing where the teacher knew that a lot of the kids weren't going to be in class. Whether it was a field trip or whether it was a snow day or something like that. I can't remember that detail, but he knew that a lot of the kids weren't going to be in class, and there might be about a third of the kids. And he brought in his APBA baseball game from 1960. And I fell in love with it right away. And I took my paper route money and I bought the 1972 I sent it for the game, and it had the 72 baseball cards in it.
Okay.
And I played that thing religiously. Like, the Detroit Tigers were so good. They were always going to the World Series. Their envelope wore out. I had to make a new one out of loose leaf paper and write Detroit Tigers, American League on it, and but I played it religiously until I went to college, and I discovered beer and girls, and I stopped playing. I put it on the shelf for a while. Then 2013, I was home and I was off and I was kind of bored, and I went online and I looked to see if the company was still around.
Okay.
And I bought the cards for the 2012 season, and I got back into it, and I got back into it in a kind of a stupid, obsessive way. And then I ended up amassing whole sets of other years' cards for baseball. And I in 1980, I bought the 79 football game from APBA.
Okay.
And I got into that for a while, and I loved it. I loved that game, but they've changed the football game now. And I got the game from 1990, the newer game, and it's different. It's harder to play.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I as I said to you in our pre-show talk, I played the Super Bowl between the Bills and the Giants. I think it was whatever it was. I can't remember which Super Bowl XX or something. I played that game with my son, and it took us almost 5 hours to play that game.
Yeah.
And it felt, to me, it felt like really hard. We could never get any offense going. Now I understand that because both teams had really good defenses.
Right.
But I'm sure if I'd have played the Bills against, I don't know, the Atlanta Falcons or something at that time, it might have been a different outcome. It might have flowed better. Well,
we're going to have to, at some point here, and now that winter's setting in, so we'll probably have a lot more time. You and I are going to have play, because I got the 95 game.
Oh yeah.
And I got it's got to be the 1985 game, because they have the Indianapolis Colts car. I have the Indianapolis Colts, but you're going to have to teach me.
One? Okay.
Yeah, it could be. I don't remember.
I haven't played it in a while.
Yeah. So you're going to have to teach me how to play. I'm going to have to sit down. You're going to have to.
I think I'm going to have to relearn how to play first.
Okay.
Because I would play it solo, and I would play it head to head with other people. Okay. And but when you play it solo, you just kind of call the plays that you want to call, as opposed to trying to focus or spy on one guy or something.
Right.
When you're playing head to head.
Yeah. Well, I got I'm in a league, and it's been a while. I mean, we're all of us work, and we got with a group of CFL podcasters.
Yeah.
That we've been playing.
Well, you play the CFL game, right?
Right, the Cold Snap game.
Yeah.
And this is a plug here. I'll throw this a plug in. One of our new sponsors from Play.com.
Oh, good.
And so, but we've been playing that really about the past year. I mean, we're 9 weeks into a 10-week season, and pandemic's lasted almost 18 months. So
What season are you playing with the CFL?
well, what we're doing is we're playing all the greatest teams.
Oh, okay.
So I have, being CFL America, well, of course, I'm grabbing the Baltimore Stallions.
They were a really good team. And
well,
what made them really good, I was going to say, what made Baltimore really good, Don Matthews was an experienced CFL coach.
Right.
And they had a lot of players, American players that had played in the CFL before. So they were almost like an all-star team.
They were.
In Baltimore.
Yeah. But on paper, they're horrible.
Oh, really?
Because I have had the worst luck. I squeaked out one win. I'm literally 1-8.
Really? Who are you playing against?
I'm playing against the 81 Eskimos.
Oh,
the 91 Argonauts.
Well, this explains much.
Even the 94 Sacramento Gold Miners have beaten me in the last second. So
with David Archer?
Yeah. His, but it's been fun because I've learned so much. I mean, that's the great thing about doing the simulation games is you learn who these players are. And as somebody who didn't grow up with the CFL, didn't really watch CFL, going back to that beer and girls thing. Well, the beer and girls thing is, when they had the American expansion, that was my beer and girls time because I had other things going on. I wasn't going to sit all day at my apartment by myself watching during the summer, watching a CFL game.
No, I understand that.
I'm getting out. But yeah, and sitting down and playing the simulation games, learning about the past. And, I do like tomorrow, good example. Tomorrow I have 2 games. I'm in 3 computer simulation leagues. I was in 8. I had to cut back way. Oh yeah. I overextended big time. And, I felt horrible, had all the good intentions, but you know how it is playing these games. You really get into it. Now with the computer stuff, yeah, it's a shorter amount of time, but there's still time involved.
Sure.
And so now I'm in 3 leagues. I've got, in fact, I played one game today. I've got the 68 Dolphins, and my 68 Dolphins are a far cry better from my 66 Dolphins.
Yes.
Who were 0-13-1.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then the next season, 67, I was 1-13. So I've literally tripled the number of wins in the 68 season. So, that first season that I played, I mean, I had the worst record. So right away, I grew up being a Bob Greasy fan. Of course I'm grabbing Greasy. We're going to build around him. So knock on wood, we'll see. But how about you? I mean, do you get that when you play the game? I mean, the best part is you kind of get to relive your childhood a little bit.
You do. And you also get to understand a little bit better about what made the team successful and where their strengths were and where any weaknesses might have been as well. And I think it makes you a more knowledgeable fan too.
Yeah. And that's something I'm learning because I got into the action PC stuff. I read a great book by Ted Kluck called Pastime about playing simulation football. And, and then I got into the APBA stuff by actually, seeing stuff on Facebook and actually, and you're actually, and I'm not going to name his name on the podcast, but you and I are actually mutual friends with somebody that I bought the APBA football game from. And so when I saw that, I'm like, it made me smile. It's just like, it's such a small world.
It really is. It really is. But as Stephen Wright once said, I wouldn't want to paint it.
Right. And so, I mean, just, and there's something about playing the games that makes you feel 12 again. I mean, it's the only way to describe it.
And I next year will be the 50 years since I got my game.
Okay. Wow.
It was the 1972 game.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to do a Montreal Expos kind of a replay.
Right.
Montreal was my favorite team.
Have you ever looked at any of the computer simulation games?
I want to be the one that makes the moves. I want to be the one that takes the pitchers out and does the pinch hitting. And all that stuff.
I mean, and we can talk more about it after, but like on the action PC stuff, you can do that.
Yeah. The way I understood it from reading things on the APBA Facebook page and stuff like that, I kind of understood that the computer does a lot of the moves. And
there's a lot of control in the computer games. I mean, but the computer does speed up things too. It makes they do all the math for you.
Oh, okay.
It's really the only way to describe it.
But that's one of the joys of playing these games, is to generate all these numbers. I mean, for the bowling, like this year, I've put my baseball and my football aside, and I've just concentrated on the bowling whenever I've had a chance. With writing and with the podcast and everything like that, it's taken time away from a lot of it. And like I'm in the middle of a tournament right now where I'm just in the preliminary bracket games, and I put it aside because I got this idea to write a story about the 81 Expos and going down to the last, Blue Monday, Rick Monday, the home run against Steve Rogers. Because the other
Bill
night,
Gullickson on that team, the Bill Gullickson pitch,
yeah.
I went to high school with his sister and
really,
brother.
Yeah. Did Bill Gullickson pass away recently?
I don't know.
Or was it Scott Sanderson? I think it was Scott Sanderson that passed away. But the other night driving home, Max Scherzer came in to save the game for the Dodgers in the 9th inning. And I got this shiver and this flashback to 1981 when they brought in Steve Rogers to come in and get the Dodgers out in the 9th inning, and Rick Monday hit the home run off him, and beat the Expos and went to the World Series and defeated the Yankees. And I thought, oh my God, don't bring Scherzer in. It's not a good thing to bring in a starter in the 9th inning I remember, because Rogers was a notoriously slow starter.
Yeah.
It took him a while to get going in games. And what are you doing bringing him in the 9th when, he has to start throwing bombs right away. He's not that kind of pitcher. And And sure enough, it backfired on
you were like, I've seen this movie before.
Absolutely I was, but it worked out for Scherzer and it worked out for the Dodgers.
Yeah. Well, and that's, it's something too, with playing the board games, and you actually kind of, you got to, there's something about pen and pencil working, because I have the pay dirt game too.
Yeah.
And I've got the Avalon Hill too. And it's just something just old fashioned. It's like going through.
It feels like you are in the game and you are part of it. And like I keep my baseball stats. They have evolved over time. So I have this extensive baseball page on Excel, and it's like I keep track of everybody's OPS or on base percentage, their OPS, everything.
Yeah.
And pitchers' whips and their not just ERAs, but their walks per 9 inning, their Ks, strikeout to walk ratio, all that stuff, and everything. And people look at me like I'm some kind of idiot or nerd or something, and that's fine.
Well, that's the fun thing. Now we're at an age now, you and I both, and we live in a world where being a nerd is actually cool.
You know what? I'm at an age too where I don't care what people think of me.
Well, anymore. Yeah, I'm right there with you too. It's like, I don't care. Whatever you think.
Yeah.
What? I don't care.
You know what? I'm happy in my little box here. I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, kind of going full circle to talking about when we talked about at the beginning, just doing these podcasts and sitting down and talking and nerding out with each other, because this is something that, let's face it, even 10 years ago, none of us really had.
Well, how could you do it? I mean, I had to figure out how to do this, how to do a Zoom call. And there's a historian a guy who's become a friend of mine, a Montreal Expos historian, and he's written like 6 books, and he's maybe 7 now on the Expos, on different aspects of the Expos. And I tried to do a Zoom call with him, but he couldn't get Zoom to work. So I ended up driving to his house in Oshawa, which is like an hour and a half to an hour and 3/4 away from here. And it was during the pandemic. So we sat in his living room. We sat 6 feet apart. I had a broken hockey stick that I taped this microphone to.
Yeah.
And I passed it back and forth like we were doing an interview that way. And we did the whole thing like that.
Yeah.
And it was like an hour long. And it was like my arm was sore at the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just we live in a, for his, you and I both turn on the news every day and we see what comes across. And it's like, but then, we turn our attention to sports, and then we turn, you and I both go to our Twitter feed, we do our podcast. And it's like, man, this is nice. And this is just something that,
It's fun too. After I've written something and people at work will come up to me and say, I really like the way that you wrote that or something,
Oh yeah. Well, it's like when, you and I first got to know each other, you sent me that article on the Argonauts. That was a beautiful article. I was, I mean, yeah, dude,
I appreciate that. And I tell you, I can't thank you enough for the response that you put out on Twitter, because it was like, it exploded.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I love about Twitter and blogging and everything. I like to promote other people. I mean, when we first started doing the podcast, I would kick out, hey, we're doing this. But after a while, I mean, I'll self-promote a little bit. But then, you know what the joy is when people find you and let you know that they really like what you're putting out.
Yeah.
And you and I, neither one of us, we're not advocating for anything. We're not, let's face it, we're not getting rich doing this.
No,
we're doing it for the love of the game.
I have a friend and she says to me, you have to figure out a way to monetize this. And I'm thinking like, well, if it happens, it happens.
Right.
I've put together a manuscript of the pieces I've written, and I'm trying to shop it around now to publishers, and so far nothing. But if something happens, it'll be like a bonus.
Yeah. And I mean, writing a book, and I've got good friends of mine that are authors. You don't get rich writing a book. And you're an author. When you wrote that book on the Rough Riders, I mean,
in Canada, if you are an author or a writer, in order to make money, you have to basically put out a book a month.
Right.
In order to be able to live off that.
Yeah.
And that's pretty impossible.
Yeah. Well, and that's a beautiful thing too. I mean, about the internet, we can just post stuff up there, and if people stumble upon it and read it, awesome. Like our podcast, people stumble upon it, listen to it, great. Because, we just live in a day and age now where, at least to me, I love being able to do this because, use the Gridiron Japan. Scott is a retired sports writer. Him and I do this for the love of the game. Yep. We both, our goal for our podcast is we want to help make, the network successful. So anything we can do to help do it, we're pretty much team first. And then over doing the other podcasts that I do, I've got 2 co-hosts, and I told them, I go, guys, I want to see, I'm in this for you. I like being behind the scenes. I like being part of the team, but I want this to be a vehicle for you guys to be successful with your careers, because I'm looking at it from my perspective going, my careers are right at an end, and I'm going to be moving on to the next thing, but I just want to help those guys, do bigger and better things, down the road. And that's why I love doing this, and most importantly, talking to guys like you who, we've spent hours tonight talking, literally.
Yep. Yeah.
And I do appreciate it. And
before we wrap, has always been my thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sports history has always been my thing. And the fact that now that I have a way to express it, it makes me happy. That's what it does.
Yeah. And we'll definitely talk more as we go along here. I know Scott and I in the past month, I've had some personal stuff, work stuff and stuff come up. So our podcast schedule has slowed down. And, last couple of weeks ago, Scott and I sat down with Michael McCambridge, who, if you ever get a chance to interview, awesome. It's interviewing him. Boy, that's, to interview one of your favorite sports authors. Oh, wow. It was, I told him I'm fanboying out a little bit because I just love your stuff. And if you ever, and we'll talk offline too, in terms of, and so before we wrap up, how can everybody find you? Let's talk about your podcast, how to find you, how often you guys put a podcast out, and where to find all the stuff that you've written too.
The firedupnetwork.ca, all one word, firedupnetwork.ca. Or if you follow me on Twitter at Howie Mooney, my pinned tweet right at the top, it gives you a URL that you can click on, and you can go to all of our podcasts. Sports Lunatics, Google Sports Lunatics, and they'll all come up that way as well.
And how long have you guys been doing the podcast?
We've been doing the podcast now for getting a better part of 2 years now.
Okay.
We've put out, we're up to almost 80 episodes now that we've done. That's how you can do it right there.
Okay, awesome. It's funny too, when you well know, after a while you're like, oh my God, we've done this many shows.
Well,
like,
when
this is pretty awesome.
Sean and I lived in the same part of town,
Yeah.
and so we could get together whenever we wanted to. We were putting out 2 shows a week.
Oh,
now he lives in
wow.
Halifax, Nova Scotia, and I live in Ontario. It makes it a lot harder for us to get together.
Yeah. Well, and at least we got the technology, because you and I have been talking all night, and there has not been one hiccup on our signal, and the frustrations.
I've got to say goodbye though, Greg. I've been drinking a lot of water.
Gotcha. All right, my friend. Well, listen, I will let you go. But I'm gonna hit the stop button. But take care of business and come on back, and we'll wrap up. We'll talk some other stuff offline. So
will do. I will. Just give me 1 second.
Okay. Hey, for everybody, thank you very much for listening, and hope to have another show out for you soon. Bye-bye.
Rough Riders, we're behind you to a man. Singles, field goals, forward passes, get the touches when you can. This is your year, Rough Riders, we're the gang to cheer you on. Toughies, break a final, you can make it on. Rough Riders on. Hold that line, gang, rough and tumble. Hit 'em hard and make them fumble. Make them
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
We here at the Sports History Network proudly partner with 26 podcasts, all revolving around the history of sports. But did you know that many of our hosts were sports history authors way before they started their shows? It's true. We've got Joe Ziemba, host of When Football Was Football, Joe Zagurski, host of Pro Football in the 1970s, Mark Morthier, host of Yesterday Sports, Tommy Phillips, host of Lombardi Memories, and Scott Adamson, co-host of From the 55-Yard Line. All these authors have many books for you to choose from. To check them out, go to our website at sportshistorynetwork.com/sportshistorybooks. Pick up your copy today. Soundtrack provided by Kevin MacLeod of filmmusic.io.